Chapter 15, Trace Minerals, Screencast 1. The first trace mineral that we're going to address is iron. Keep in mind, trace minerals are those minerals that we need in small quantities. We basically describe iron in two ways. One is heme iron, and that is found in animal flesh. Non-heme iron is that iron that is found in vegetables, grains, and supplements. Another way to actually get iron is to actually use iron cookware, such as cast iron. This could be something that is another source of iron because acidic foods actually increase the amount that is transferred to foods. Now here, if we look at this particular figure, we can basically see most of the best sources of iron are coming from animal sources and animal flesh. If we look at something such as spinach, not a lot there. And something also to keep in mind when we are addressing iron, especially non-heme iron, it is not absorbed as well in the body. Now, when we look at the RDA, it is 18 milligrams per day for women 50 and under, and after 51, it drops down to 8 milligrams per day, and that's because they are no longer losing iron through menstrual blood. Generally, when we look at what it is for men, it is 8 milligrams per day. The daily value is established at the high end for women and is 18 milligrams. When we look at the typical Western diet, there's approximately 6 milligrams of iron for every 1,000 calories. Now, this particular diagram is focusing on iron absorption and distribution. Now, keep in mind, we're only going to walk through 1 through 5. We're not going to look at A, B, and C. So you're not responsible for that, but you are responsible for the following. So iron actually binds with a mucosal protein, and that is called ferritin, and when stored in intestinal cells. If intestinal absorptive cells are sloughed off before iron is absorbed, the iron passes out of the body in the feces. This sloughing allows the body to control the absorption of iron. Iron that enters the bloodstream binds to transferrin, and we see a detailed view of iron absorption at the bottom of this figure. Now, once iron is bound to transferrin and is then distributed to the liver, muscle, bone, marrow, and other body tissue. The liver and spleen will actually harvest iron from worn-out red blood cells, thereby allowing most iron in the body to actually be reused. Now here we're looking at a difference in the amount of non-heme versus heme iron that's actually being taken. And here, if we look at far as the left side, we see about 10% of the intake. On the right, approximately 90% of the intake. And if we basically look at the overall iron absorption, 17 of non-heme iron absorbed, 25% of heme iron absorbed. Overall, we see an absorption of approximately 18%. So that is an important thing to keep in mind over here. And so when we look at that. Now, there are a number of factors that affect iron absorption. So this is something that you do want to be comfortable. The factors that will increase the absorption of iron are high body demand for red blood cells, things such as blood loss, high altitude, physical training, pregnancy, and anemia. Low body stores of iron, heme iron in food, meat protein factor, also known as MPF, vitamin C intake, and gastric acidity. Factors that will decrease the absorption of iron will be low need for iron due to high stores of iron, phytic acid in whole grains and legumes, oxalic acid in leafy vegetables, polyphenols in tea, coffee, red wine, and oregano. And previously, we did address that polyphenols, oxalic acid, and phytic acid play a very significant role in decreasing the absorption of iron. Situations in which there is a reduced gastric acidity, and also if there is an excessive intake of other minerals. Examples would be zinc, manganese, and calcium. Now, if we look at the functions of iron, they are relatively diverse. Iron does participate in oxidation and reduction reactions. It can be harmful, though, because iron actually forms free radical compounds. And that is the reason why there is very little free iron in the body. The majority of iron is always going to be found bound. It is an essential part of hemoglobin, and this has been addressed multiple times. And remember, that is found in red blood cells, and it is responsible for the transport of oxygen in the body. If we look at myoglobin, this is another oxygen transport protein, but this is specific to muscle cells. This will transport oxygen from red blood cells to skeletal and heart muscle. Now, if we look at iron and functional proteins, so once again, examples would be hemoglobin, myoglobin, and iron-containing enzymes. If we look at iron and transport proteins, those will be transferrin, ferroportin, and iron in storage proteins will be ferritin and hemosiderin. So keep in mind these different types of iron proteins that are there. We also know that iron-containing enzymes play a role in energy metabolism. Think back to the electron transport chain, and iron is a major component of cytochromes. They're required for the first step of the citric acid cycle. It's necessary for drug and alcohol transformation, and also the excretion of organic compounds. Many cofactors for enzymes are involved in the synthesis of neurotransmitters and also required for the production of lymphocytes and natural killer cells to help prevent infections. Now, iron deficiency is the most widespread deficiency in the United States, and it is not limited to the United States. And we can also say that worldwide, this is one of the biggest nutrient deficiencies out there. When we look at someone that has mild to moderate deficiency, we're going to start seeing a compromised immune function. As deficiency progresses, we're going to see a decrease in the synthesis of hemoglobin, and this actually results in iron deficiency anemia. General symptoms include fatigue and a decreased ability to perform normal activities. Metabolism is impaired, cognitive development is delayed, and this is an especially important concern in young children. Now, how this is diagnosed is by red blood cells that are microcytic and hypochromic. This means that there's decreased amounts of hematocrit and hemoglobin and transferrin receptor numbers. So there generally are a number of blood tests that are taken to kind of determine the type of iron deficiency someone might have. Here we're looking at some differences in whole blood and red blood cells. So this would be part of the assessment of a sample to determine if there is actually an iron deficiency present. Now, there are 3 stages of iron deficiency. When we look at marginal or early iron deficiency, this could be due to decreased iron intake, an increase in iron losses, a decrease in iron stores, or it could be due to an increase in transferrin receptors. Typically, there are no apparent symptoms. Once we get to the point where we start to see moderate iron deficiency, we're going to see depleted iron stores. There's going to be a decrease in work exercise capacity. This is also going to include factors such as decreased immune function and a decrease in the transport of iron. When we look at severe iron deficiency and iron deficiency anemia, we look at decreased hemoglobin and red blood cell synthesis. There is the anemia that we see. There's going to be a decreased oxygen transport, increased fatigue. There's going to be poor work or exercise performance. You will see an increased incidence of infection. There are going to be declines in growth and cognitive development in children, and the potential for mortality. Now, what is more of an issue is iron overload and toxicity. The upper level is set at 45 milligrams per day. Above this level, nausea, vomiting, stomach irritation, diarrhea, and the impaired absorption of other minerals will take place. Accidental iron overdoses are one of the leading causes of poisoning in children under 6 years of age. This is due to the consumption of iron-containing supplements, and it's not surprising that many people will have iron supplements due to this being one of the biggest deficiencies we see. In adults, iron overload is more likely due to a genetic condition called hemochromatosis.